Welcome to Storytime with Jocelyn. This week's featured Disney princess, we're going to be reading Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And now Jocelyn's holding her Snow White doll. And these, I've had these for a long time, are the Seven Dwarfs. They'll be joining us for Storytime. We've got Happy. We've got Bashful. We've got Dopey. We've got Sneezy. We've got Grumpy, Sleepy, and down here at the bottom is Doc. And these are one of my favorites. Things that I've had for a long time. Aren't they cute? So yes, this week we're going to be doing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which is my favorite Disney movie. So we're going to be reading in the month of June 4 princesses. And we're featuring Snow White this week. And so you're going to get 7 chapters today. And the rest will be another 7 chapters on Friday. And we're going to be reading this month in Jocelyn's Disney Princess Treasury. At the end of the video on Friday, I will tell you next week's featured princess. So let us begin with the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Right, Jocelyn? Chapter 1. In a little kingdom graced with rolling hills and sparkling rivers and bountiful forests, there once lived a lovely young princess named Snow White. Snow White was not only kind, but beautiful as well. Her hair was the deepest ebony. Her complexion was the purest ivory. Snow White's father, the king, was dead. So she lived in the palace with her stepmother, the queen. And although the queen was also very beautiful, her beauty was only skin deep. Inside, she was cold and heartless, and as evil as an ugly old witch. The queen was very jealous of Snow White's beauty, so much that she forced the little princess to dress in tattered rags and made her work long hours as a scurry maid. The queen thought that, disguised in this way, Snow White's beauty could never rival her own. Still, that wasn't enough to satisfy her vanity. In a dark and forbidding part of the castle, the queen kept a magic mirror. And every day she would stand before the ornate mirror and chant, "Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And every day the surface of the mirror would swirl like a dark whirlpool, and a grim face would appear as if rising from the depths. "You are the fairest one of all, my queen," the face would answer. The queen would smile and nod and be content. As time went on, however, Snow White's beauty became more and more apparent, in spite of the queen's efforts to hide it. So it was just that on one bright and sunny day, when the queen asked the mirror in her usual question, it replied in its deep, somber voice, "Famed in thy beauty, majesty, but hold, a lovely maid I see. Rags cannot hide her gentle grace. Alas, she is more fair than thee." The queen stiffened in shocked surprise. Then she lowered her eyebrows and said, "Alas for her, reveal her name." And the face in the mirror answered, "Lips as red as rose, hair black as ebony, skin white as snow." "Snow White!" the queen hissed. At the very moment the queen was consulting her magic mirror, Snow White was busy scarfing the stone steps of the courtyard below. The work was hard, but Snow White performed the task in good spirits. And now she sang beautifully as a flock of white doves fluttered around her, cooing and bobbling. There's the magic mirror. When she turned to draw water from a nearby well, Snow White peered down at her reflection and was quite startled to see another face next to hers. "Oh!" she cried. Looking up, she saw a handsome man in a fine dress of a prince standing right beside her. "Oh!" she cried again, backing away. "Did I frighten you? I didn't mean to," the prince said with concern. "It's just that I heard such a lovely song as I was riding by." Snow White was so flustered she couldn't speak. Finally, she bolted toward the castle door, scattering the doves in her wake. "Wait, please don't go," cried the prince. "I'd like to talk to you some more." But Snow White was already running up the castle's winding stone steps to a small balcony that overlooked the courtyard. When she reached the balcony, she peeked past the heavy curtains and looked down. The prince was still there, gazing up at the castle. He looked so handsome and seemed so kind that Snow White felt drawn to him. Timidly at first, and then more boldly, she stepped closer to the balcony's edge. When the prince saw her, he couldn't help but smile. She was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. "Please come back," he urged. "I must get to know you." Snow White smiled too, but still did not move from the balcony. As the prince continued to entreat her to return, a dove flew up onto Snow White's hand. On impulse, she kissed the dove and bade it down to fly down to the young man below. The dove gently fluttered down to the prince and kissed him in return. The prince blushed and cried, "I shall never forget you." And with that, Snow White withdrew into the dark castle. Unknown to either Snow White or the prince, the queen had been watching this tender scene, which filled her with even more anger and more jealousy. Now the ruler nodded as if she had made up her mind to carry out an evil plan. And in fact, she did. She called her chief's huntsman to her throne. When the huntsman arrived, the queen commanded him in a firm voice, "Take Snow White far into the forest and find some secluded glade where she can pick wild flowers." "Yes, your majesty," answered the huntsman. "And there, my faithful huntsman, you will kill her." Although the huntsman was a hardened man, he gasped and stared up to his queen. "But your majesty," he cried, "the little princess!" "Silence!" snapped the queen. "You know the penalty if you fail." The huntsman bowed his head. "Yes, your majesty," he said solemnly. Then the queen paused and held out an ornate red box. Its clasp was formed by a jeweled dagger piercing a golden heart. "But to make doubly sure you do not fail," the queen continued, "bring back her heart in this." The huntsman took the box and slowly nodded his head. Do you see the box? Chapter 2. Snow White was soon wandering cheerfully through a lush green meadow with the huntsman following close behind. She had been told that the queen wanted some wildflowers for her table, and she was glad of a chance to go out into surrounding countryside. She was reading and reaching to pick up of a cluster of bright daisies when she spied a baby bird on the ground beside a large rock. "Why, hello there," Snow White said. The tiny creature shook its blue speckled wings and chirped hello in response. Snow White bent down to pick up the bird and suddenly noticed a large dark shadow creeping up the rock. She whirled around in fright and then cringed in terror as she saw the huntsman leaning and looming over her, a sharp knife in his hand. She pressed herself against the rock and put her hands up to shield her face. The huntsman came to her grimly, his knife poised to strike, but at the last moment his hand shook and his face fell in dismay. I can't do it, he cried as he dropped to his knees. Forgive me. I beg of your highness, forgive me. Why, I don't understand, stammered the frightening princess. She's mad, jealous of you, the huntsman said. She'll stop at nothing. Snow White stared at the huntsman for a moment in shock and confusion. But who? She grasped. The queen, answered the huntsman. The queen? Echoed Snow White, her face glowing pale. Yes, said the huntsman. Now quick, child, run away and hide. But where shall I go? Asked Snow White in a trembling voice. Into the woods, anywhere, said the huntsman, gesturing wildly at the thick forest just beyond the meadow. Now go, run, and don't come back. Without another word, Snow White whirled and fled into the dark forest. She could hear the huntsman urging her on, so she stumbled blindly through the dense trees and brush, and she ran. The things in the forest took on shapes and forms she had never before imagined. The branches of trees sprung to life around her, their claw-like hands reaching out to grab her. Rocks became hunched, wild animals ready to rear up at the moment's notice. Snow White ran across a hilly log, and all at once the spooky, scroungy ground gave her way underneath her, and she fell to the dark pool full of half-rotted logs. As she frantically struggled to free herself from the murky waters, the floaty logs were transformed into terrifying crocodiles, snapping at her with wild jaws. There's the huntsman pleading with the princess. She finally stumbled out of the pool and ran again, deeper and deeper into the forest until she saw her path blocked by an enormous black tree. Its gnarled trunk showed a grotesque and frightening face, and its thick branches reached out as if to grab and crush her. Snow White screamed, "Ah!" and stumbled into a nearby clearing. There she fell to the mossy earth, sobbing in terror until she was so exhausted she fell fast asleep where she laid. Chapter 3. The next morning, as the rays of the rising sun streamed down into the woods, curious eyes peeked out from the surrounding trees and bushes and stared at the sleeping girl. 3 fawns bumbled their heads and then curiously picked their way forward. They were joined by a group of chattering chipmunks and bushy-tailed squirrels zigzagging their way across the clearing. A rabbit family hopped out of its hiding place behind an old tree, followed by 2 black-eyed raccoons and a small flock of quail. As a half a dozen bluebirds fluttered down from the trees to join the other animals, Jocelyn, one frisky little rabbit, bolder than the rest, hopped right up to Snow White. With a twitching pink nose, it sniffed at her hair. The princess stirred and raised her head. "Oh!" she cried. "See, there's nothing to be afraid of." The rabbit seemed as startled as Snow White, and it bounded away, while the other creatures also scurried for cover. Snow White looked around and said, "Please don't run away. I won't hurt you," as if they understood her. The forest animals reappeared, and Snow White smiled at them. "I'm awfully sorry," she continued. "I know. I didn't mean to frighten you all, but you don't know what I've been through." The gentle creatures now came out and surrounded her. A baby bluebird perched on Snow White's hand, and she was heartened by its trust. "I really feel quite happy now," she said. "I'm sure I'll get along somehow." The animals all nodded in agreement. "But I do need a place to sleep," Snow White said. "Maybe you know where I can stay," she asked the animals kindly. A group of bluebirds chirped and tweeted in response. "You do?" Snow White cried as she rose to her feet. "Will you take me there?" In answer, The birds took Snow White's cape with their small beaks and urged her to follow them. Soon a small parade of animals was following Snow White and the birds as they made their way through the tangled woods. The birds led Snow White to snug a little house nestled deep in the forest. As soon as she saw the cottage, Snow White's spirits rose. It was a tiny house with white walls and a brown thatched roof. A small wooden bench stood outside, as if it to welcome a weary traveler. "Oh, it's adorable," Snow White murmured. "Just like a dollhouse. I like it here already," she said as she inspected the house from close up. Snow White went to the window and wiped a clear circle in the glimmy glass. "It's so dark inside," she said. "I don't think there's anyone here or home." Nevertheless, she went back to the doorway, which was framed by leafy vines on either side, and politely knocked on the wooden door. No one answered. She turned to the animals. "I guess there's no one home," she said. She knocked again and waited, but there was no answer. Then she noticed that the door had opened a crack. With a brisk step, she entered the tiny house and called, "Hello, may I come in?" No one answered. Snow White ventured further into the house, and when she did, she stared around in wonder. Everything was so small. "What a cute little chair," she explained. Then she saw there was 7 little chairs. "Why, there must be 7 little children living here," Snow White said to her animal friends. And as she looked around, she also realized that the whole cottage was full of dust and dirt, and the sink was filled with unwashed dishes. There were dirty clothes everywhere, and the fireplace looked as if it hadn't been swept out in years. "Ooh, Jocelyn. Why, they have never swept this room," Snow White said. "You'd think their mother would." Then she paused as a thought occurred to her. "Maybe they have no mother," she said. The animals nodded their heads in sad agreement. "Then they're orphans," Snow White said. "That's too bad." She gazed around at the untidy little house for a long moment, then suddenly announced, "I know what we'll do." The animals all waited expectantly for Snow White to continue. "We'll clean up and surprise them." Snow White clapped her hands in satisfaction. "Then when they see how helpful I can be, maybe they'll let me stay," she said. Again, the animals nodded as if they understood Snow White's intentions. "Well, let's not just all stand here," she said with a good-natured laugh. "Let's get busy." And in no time at all, they did. The squirrels scurried cheerfully around the cottage, sweeping the floor and dusting off the furniture with their busy tails. The raccoons helped Snow White wash the dishes by rubbing the garments together between their paws to get them sparkly clean. The birds eagerly flew up in every nook and cranny in the ceiling, pulling out down cobwebs and balls of dust with their strong beaks. The deer and the rabbits pushed and pulled tables and chairs into their proper places. Even the tiny chipmunks gladly helped, carrying dirty cups and dishes and silverware in their paws and mouths, and depositing them in a wooden sink to be washed. With everybody doing their share, the work went smoothly throughout the afternoon as the sun slowly lowered to the west. Do you do chores at home? While all this was going on, the people who lived in the cottage were in the hills not far away, digging for jewels in a deep, dark mine. Hi-ho, hi-ho, it's off to work we go. That's my favorite song. There were 7 men in all, and they were dwarfs. And in spite of their different personalities, The dwarfs get along quite well together and work side by side in perfect harmony. As they swung their picks and shovels, they sang a work song that echoed back to them throughout the caverns and tunnels of the mine. Hi-ho, hi-ho. Just as they started to sing another chorus, a clock in the mine struck 5. One of the dwarfs looked up and cried, "Hi-ho!" The others quickly collected their tools and marched out of the mine in single file. They traveled along the well-worn path that would through the woods and over rocky hills and small ravines. And all the while they whistled and sang, content to be heading home after a good day's work. Hi-ho, hi-ho, it's off to work we go. Back at the cottage, Snow White and the animals looked around with pride at the sparkling clean room. "Now let's see what's upstairs," she said. Snow White led the way up the small wooden steps as the animals followed behind. She saw that there was a bedroom with 7 little beds in it. One each wooden bed board. A name was carved. Snow White looked at each one in turn. Snow like the 7 dwarfs. Hi-ho, hi-ho. "What funny names for children," she said. "Doc? Happy? Sneezy? Dopey?" Snow White laughed as she continued reading. "Grumpy? Bashful? Sleepy?" Just then, she yawned, just like Joss. "I'm a little sleepy myself," she murmured. Snow White laid across the 3 little beds and sighed. The animals gently pulled a sheet up to cover her and then one by one found cozy spots of their own. Snow White's eyes closed and soon she and the forest creatures were fast asleep. Chapter 4. As Snow White and her friends slept in the little cottage, the low sound of singing echoed through the forest. Hi-ho, hi-ho. It worked the animals instantly. It woke them. With tails twitching and nose quivering, they listened as the singing grew louder. Hi-ho, hi-ho. It was the dwarfs making their way home from work. With startling leaps and bounds, the deer, the squirrels, the rabbits, the chipmunks scuttled out of the house and back into the woods, leaving Snow White still sleeping peacefully on the tiny beds. As the dwarfs approached the house, Doc pointed and said, "Look, our house. The light's lit. The light's lit. The light's light." The dwarfs immediately took cover behind a grove of thick pines. "Jiminy crickets!" they all cried at once. "Doors open, chimney smoking," said Doc. "Something's in there." It may be a ghost," stammered Happy. "Or a goblin," whispered Bashful. "It might be a dragon," said Sneezy, his nose tickled by the scent of the pines. The other dwarfs glared at him and motioned him to be quiet. Grumpy scoured and said, "Mark my words, there's trouble a brewing. Felt it coming all day. My corns hurt." The dwarfs all looked at each other in concern. "What do we do?" asked Sleepy. I'm too sleepy to think. Let's sneak on in," Happy explained. "Yes, huh?" Doc answered, suddenly aware of what Happy was proposing. Then he stood up straighter and addressed the others. We'll sneak up. Sneak up on it. Come on, men, follow me." The dwarfs slowly and cautiously crept up to the house, one behind the other. When they got to the door, they filed in, quiet as mice, with Dopey in the rear. They were so close to each other that they looked glued together. Suddenly, Dopey slammed the door shut. The dwarf screamed, "Ah!" and huddled against each other, expecting the worst. When they realized it was just Dopey, they put their fingers in their lips and said, "Shh. Shh." Dopey nodded. Then he turned to the door and put his finger to his lips and repeated to the door, "Shh." As the dwarfs crept through the house, they noticed that things didn't seem quite the same as they had left them that morning. "Look, the floor's been swept," said Doc. Grumpy rumbled a finger along the top of a chair. Whoop. "Huh? Chair's been dusted," he said in disgust. "And our window's been washed," cried Happy as he looked out of the forest beyond. "Why, the whole place is clean," Doc finally announced. "There's dirty work afoot," grumbled Grumpy. You can tell which my favorite dwarf is. Just then Happy spied their big black kettle brooming in the fireplace and sniffed. "Something's cooking," he said, "and it smells good." Happy grabbed the spoon and was about to dip it into the kettle when Grumpy snatched it away and yelled, "Don't touch it, you fool! It might be poison!" Glancing nervously around the room, the dwarfs felt sure that some sort of unknown and terrible creature had invaded their home. Dopey is Jocelyn's favorite. Chapter 5. While the dwarfs were creeping about below, some birds were hiding in the rafters above, nodding and winking at each other. Yes, they knew who the unexpected visitor was. Suddenly, they tapped their beaks against the rafters, and the dwarfs huddled together fearfully. "Hear that?" whispered Grumpy. "Whatever it is, it's this room right now. It's in it." The birds couldn't help twinkling to themselves in mischievous delight. Suddenly, they let out a high-pitched shriek, and the dwarfs stumbled all over themselves in panic and fright. And suddenly, and finally, settled down once more. Doc pointed upstairs. It's up there," he said in a low voice. "Yeah, in the bedroom," agreed Bashful. Dodd nodded solemnly. "One of us has got to go down and chase it up. Go up and chase it down," he said. The dwarfs all nodded in agreement, and Dopey nodded eagerly, even after everyone else had stopped. Finally, he noticed that the other dwarfs were all staring in his direction. He turned to look behind him, but there was no one there. They were staring at him. They wanted him to lead the way. Dopey tried to run, but the dwarfs grabbed him. Doc handed him a candle. Here, take it," said Doc, shaking. Don't be nervous." The dwarfs pushed Dopey ahead of him and up the stairs. "Don't be afraid," said Doc. "We're right behind you." "Yeah, right behind you," echoed the others from a good distance. Dopey took a deep gulp, climbed the darkened stairs to the bedroom, and slowly opened the door. A long, low moan emancipated from the darkness. And in the frightening light of the candle, Dopey saw something moving underneath the sheets across 3 of the beds. Suddenly, the candle went out, and with a yelp, Dopey burst out of the bedroom and started to run down the dark stairs. "It's the creature!" the other dwarfs cried as they proceeded to fall all over each other, trying to get out of the way. They yelled and screamed and ran out of the cottage, slamming the door behind them. Once outside the house, they hid behind the pine trees and waited. Meanwhile, Dopey thought the creature was right behind him, and in his frantic haste, he escaped, and he crushed into a cupboard, causing pots and pans to come tumbling out. One large soup pot fell over on his head, and he blindly stumbled about. He jammed one foot into the other, smaller pot. Dizzily turning this way and that, he finally groped his way out of the cottage and headed toward the other dwarves. Here it comes, yelled Happy as he saw the strange figure with the metal head clanking and clamping toward them. Now it's our chance now, men, said Doc. We mustn't scare. The dwarfs bravely jumped on the creature as it passed by them. Tie it up, yelled Grumpy. Yeah, don't let it get away, cried Doc. As the dwarf struggled to hold the creature, its metal head fell off and it hit the ground with a thump. And in its place was a head they recognized immediately. It was Dopey. Ah, fuss and fiddlesticks, grumbled Grumpy. All that trouble for nothing. When the dwarfs finally calmed down and helped Dopey to his feet, they showered him with questions. Did you see the creature? How big was it? Was it a dragon? Was it breathing fire? What was it doing, Jocelyn? Dopey quickly gestured that the creature was sleeping. He says it's a monster, Doc cried. Asleep in our beds. Let's attack, grumbled Grumpy, while it's still sleeping. Doc agreed. Hurry, men, he shouted. It's now or never. So the dwarfs marched bravely back into the house, this time determined to face whatever danger there was. Doesn't Dopey look cute? Looks like a little elephant with that teapot on his head. They crept quietly into the bedroom and right up to the beds, where Snow White lay sleeping peacefully under the sheets. They surrounded the beds, holding up picks and clubs as weapons, and Doc slowly and shakily pulled back the covers, and the dwarfs were just about to strike when they saw Snow White. As one, they lowered their weapons as one and stood motionless. Doc was the first to recover. Well, he stammered. Well, what is it? Asked Happy, gazing at the sleeping princess. Why, stuttered Doc. It's a girl. Sneezy and Bashful both smiled. She's mighty pretty, said Sneezy. She's beautiful, said Bashful, blushing, just like an angel. All the dwarfs were captivated by Snow White, all but Grumpy. That is, Angel, huh? He said sourly. She's a female, and all females are poisoned. They fella wicked wiles. What are wicked wiles? Asked Bashful. I don't know, answered Grumpy, but I'm against them. Doc told Grumpy not to speak so loudly, or the lovely young girl might wake up. Let her wake up, replied Grumpy. She don't belong here anyhow. At that, Snow White's eyelids fluttered. She's waking up, whispered Happy. The dwarfs quickly hid at the foot of the beds. Snow White yawned and opened her eyes. She sat up and looked around, remembering where she was. Oh, dear, she said to herself. I wonder if the children are... Just then she saw the dwarfs peeking over the edge of the bedboards. Oh, cried Snow White as she pulled the covers up around her. But then she sat up straighter and stared in surprise. Why, you're not children at all, she said. You're little men. Snow White smiled prettily and said, How do you do? How do you do what? Answered Grumpy with a frown. But Snow White was not ruffled by Grumpy's rudeness. She just continued gladly. Oh, you can talk. I'm so glad. Snow White looked from one dwarf to the other and smiled. Let me try to guess your names, she said, pointing first to Doc. You must be Doc. Yes, answered Doc politely. Then she pointed at Sleepy, who was busy yawning. I know you're Sleepy, Snow White said. Sleepy answered with a bob of his head. Snow White looked at Dopey, who was glazing at her large blue eyes. You must be Dopey, she said. Dopey nodded excitingly. She cocked her head and cocked it and looked at Happy, who was smiling from ear to ear. And you've got to be happy, Snow White said. Happy chuckled in glee. Why, that's right, he cried. How did you guess? Then she leaned forward to look at Bashful, who was trying to hide behind the others. You're bashful, she said. Yep, I mean... Bashful answered, his face turning a bright pink. Just then Sneezy piled up, and he piped up. And can you guess? Achoo! Who I am? Snow White giggled. I would say you were Sneezy, she answered. Sneezy held a finger under his nose, and in a muffled voice, that's right! Achoo! When Snow White finally came to Grumpy, she looked at his folded arms and stern expression and took the same pose. You must be Grumpy, she said in a deep voice. But Grumpy just turned to Doc and said, We know who we are. Ask her who she is and what she's doing in our house. And so the dwarfs asked Snow White and told them who she was and all about her terrible flight through the forest. When the dwarfs learned that she was the Princess Snow White, they were honored to have her as a guest in their tiny forest home. All except Grumpy. He insisted that she should be made to leave. Snow White looked at the dwarfs entreatingly. You see Grumpy and how mad he looks? Please don't send me away, she pleaded. If you do, she'll kill me. Who? They asked. And so Snow White told the dwarfs about the evil stepmother, the queen. When she finished, the dwarfs all chuckled their tongues in sympathy. She's wicked, said Bashful. She's bad, said Happy. She's an old witch, said Grumpy. And I'm wearing ya. If the queen finds Snow White here, she'll sweep down and she'll wreak her vengeance on all of us. But she doesn't know where I am, said Snow White. She doesn't, huh? Grumbled Grumpy. She knows everything. She's full of black magic, he continued. She can make herself invisible. Why, she might be in this room right now. The other dwarfs looked around the room uneasily, but Snow White sat up straighter. Oh, she'll never find me here, she said brightly. And if you let me stay, I can help with the chores. I'm a good cook, too. A good cook, cried the dwarfs suddenly, remembering their old hunger and the aroma coming from the kettle. She stays, shouted the dwarfs in spite of Grumpy's glowering face. Chapter 6. Snow White went downstairs, followed by 7 hungry dwarfs. She went over to the kettle, dipped a spoon in, and tasted the contents. The dwarfs sniffed the air. It's soup! Hooray! They cried as they rushed and made a rush for the dining table. Snow White put up her hand. Just a minute, she said. Supper's not quite ready. You'll just have to find time to wash. Wash! Cried Doc. Wash? Said Bashful. Wash! Yelled Grumpy and Happy. I know I had that wrong, and your hair a mess. Grumpy threw down the spoon he had just picked up. Heh! I know there'd be a catch to it, he said. Why wash? Said Bashful. We ain't going anywhere. Yeah, Doc chimed in, and they ain't New Year's or anything. Snow White put up her hands on her lips and raised her eyebrows. She looked at the dwarfs. Oh, perhaps you have washed already, she said with a knowing smile. Recently? Do you wash your hands before you eat? Very important. Doc nodded and said, yes, that's right. Perhaps we have. When? Asked Snow White. Like you said, recently, asked Doc. The other dwarfs murmured happily in agreement. Oh, said Snow White with a suspicious look. Recently. Then let me see your hands, she said in a firm voice. The dwarfs lined up one by one, hesitantly showing Snow White their hands. Each pair was dirtier than the last. "Ugh, how shocking," said Snow White. "Worse than I thought." She shook her head slowly from side to side. "I don't think that'll do," she said with a shamefaced mien. Then she pointed at the door. "March straight outside and wash, and you will not get a bite to eat," she said with conviction. The dwarfs turned and slowly walked out of the house, moaning and groaning to themselves. All except Grumpy. He stood with his arms folded with a sour expression on his face. "Well, what about you?" asked Snow White. "Aren't you going to wash?" Instead of answering, Grumpy just sulked. "What's the matter?" said Snow White teasingly. "Cat got your tongue?" At that, Grumpy stuck out his tongue and headed out of the house in a huff. I love Grumpy. The other dwarfs were gathered around the big wooden tub in the yard. "Courage, men, courage," Doc urged. "But the water's wet," moaned Happy. "Cold, too," explained Sneezy. "We ain't gonna really do it, are we?" "Well," said Doc, struggling for a good reason. "It'll please the princess." Well, Happy beamed at that. "Okay, then," he said, looking at the water doubtfully. "I'll take a chance on her." "Me too," agreed the rest all together. Grumpy sat on the barrel close by, listening to the others. "You see," he said, "her wiles are beginning to work." Then he pointed at the dwarfs and lectured. "I'm a-warning you. You give 'em an inch, and they'll walk right over you." Doc looked sternly at Grumpy and took the other dwarfs now to listen to him. And with that, the men bravely started to scrub their faces and wash their hands and brush their teeth and comb their hair. Scrub, 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 scrub. And when they were through, they looked at each other in awe, and they hardly recognized themselves. "Ha!" cried Grumpy, still sitting on the barrel. "Bunch of old nanny goats. You make me sick. Next thing you know, she be trying to beards up the pink ribbons and smelling you up with that stuff called a perfumey. Ha! What a fine bunch of water lilies." You see Grumpy? Do you think he's gonna wash? Excuse me. The dwarfs looked at Grumpy and then at each other. Then they all nodded. "Get him!" Suddenly, Doc cried. The dwarfs pounced on Grumpy, carried him over to the tub. "Hey, let me loose, you fools!" Grumpy yelled as he squirmed to free himself, but the dwarfs paid no attention. Instead, they dumped Grumpy right into the tub of soapy water and started to scrub him good. "Now scrub hard, men," Doc urged. Excuse me. "It can't be denied. He'll look mighty cute as soon as he's dried." Grumpy fumed and fussed. "You'll pay for this," he cried as he continued to struggle to get out of the tub. Suddenly, they heard a loud clang as Snow White banged a spoon on the kettle. "Supper!" she cried out. "Supper!" the men shouted. They all let go of Grumpy at once, and he dropped back into the tub, sprunkling and bubbling bubbles as he grubbled a mouthful of subsuds. Muttering and complaining, Grumpy finally got out of the tub and headed for the house. With a hump, he joined the other dwarfs, now seated at the table, eagerly awaiting their supper. Grumpy had to watch. Chapter 7. Excuse me. Back at the castle, the queen was once again consulting her magic mirror. But as she waited calmly for the expected reply, it said instead, "Over the 7 jeweled hills, beyond the 7th fall, in the cottage of the 7 dwarfs, dwells Snow White, fairest of all." Shocked and outraged, the evil queen realized that she had been tricked. Snow White was still alive. The huntsman had not brought back Snow White's heart in a box, but that of a forest animal. The queen immediately began to plot a way to put an end to Snow White on her own. "I'll go to the dwarf's cottage myself," she mumbled, in a disguise so complete no one will ever suspect it's me. She swept down a flight of stone steps into a deep, dark dungeon as the queen made her way across the dingy chamber of squirming rats and squealed and ran for cover. Spiders, beetles, and a host of other crawling things crept away at the sight of the evil queen. Ooh. The only creature that didn't move was the queen's pet raven, who watched her approach with unblinking eyes and an evil expression to match her own. But the queen took no notice of these things. She went straight to her book of black magic and flipped through its pages until she found what she wanted. "Ah," she murmured, "a peddler's disguise. Perfect." She went over to a table cluttered with vials and beakers filled with all sorts of bubbling and smoking liquids. She selected one beaker and poured a steaming green liquid into a large goblet. "First, some mummy dust to make me old," she said as she sprinkled a fine gray powder into the glass. "To shroud my clothes, the black of night." She added a drop of black liquid. "To age my voice, a drop of crow's blood." Then a ruby red drop was added to the brew. The queen continued mixing her potion until she was satisfied that she had done everything exactly right. When she was finished, she held the goblet before her. The brew bubbled and hissed and spilled over the rim of the glass. She smiled grimly, and then with one quick motion, she swallowed the foul liquid, Jocelyn. As soon as she had done so, the queen clutched her throat as if she were choking. The dungeon seemed to spin crazily around her, and a powerful wind sprung up, wrestling her lobes and hair as she were in the midst of a hurricane. "Shh!" The queen moaned, "Ah!" as she shook violently and then crumbled over as if a powerful hand were squeezing the youth from her body. And she quivered in the grips of the magic potion, and her luscious black hair began turning a dingy white, and her smooth face started to fold into hideous wrinkles, and her long, beautiful fingers twisted and crawl like talons. And her elegant robe changed color and shape until it was no more than a faded black rag. Suddenly, a flash of brilliant green light filled the dungeon, and when it was gone, a haggard old witch stood in face of the once beautiful queen. She shrieked in both triumph and agony as the awful transformation reached its final stage. The wench glanced in the mirror and crackled. "Yes, a perfect disguise," she croaked, and humbled over in her book of spells once more. "And now," she hissed, "I must plan a special sort of death for one so fair. What shall it be?" The queen flipped through the pages until she stopped and cried, "Yes, perfect, a poison apple." She read the spell aloud as her gnawed fingers traced the words. "One taste of the poison apple and the victim's eyes will close forever in the sleeping death." Ooh. The old hag threw her head back and laughed long and loud. The sound echoing throughout the deep and dark dungeon like the shrieks of 100 black crows. All right, that's the first half of what we're going to read. What you think is going to happen next? You think the witch, the old lady, is going to find the dwarf's house? Do you think that Snow White's going to eat the apple? We'll find out on Friday. So this is one of our longest ones. So if you stuck with me to the end, I'm so happy. And Jocelyn is too. And so is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. We will continue their story next on Friday. And I hope you'll join us for the next 7 chapters of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Have a blessed week and enjoy. Bye, and God bless.